And so that started to cause, as I said before, this negative imprint on space in the sense of often we would get into some sort of discussion or argument or some sort of feeling of disconnect, and then we would start taking space, which really didn't feel good to my system. And it made me kind of like, more anxious in that way, like really nervous of like, no, but I want everything to be good all the time and we need to be close all the time, because often when we had space that was negative, there was not something good. Hi, my name is Dieke and you are listening to my podcast where I give you a look into my life as a former business consultant, now Tantra teacher and speaker. If you're interested in self-development and really receiving the education that you should have had growing up, specifically around your femininity, sexuality, love, and relationships, then you found the right place. It's here where I share my life's journey, which once was heady, numb, unorgasmic, and basically me trying to be like a man, all while shaming and blaming anything that actually made me a woman, just blindly following the path that society set out for me, to ditching my imagined corporate career, moving my ass to Bali, setting up my business, meeting and marrying my soulmate, and becoming a Tantra teacher. I'm now on a mission to make all of this feminine and tantric wisdom that I've gathered over the past years modern, down to earth, and easily applicable. And I work with you, smart, intellectual, successful, strong, independent woman, to balance out your powerful masculine side with more softness, surrender, playfulness, love, and pleasure. Basically, enlivening and juicing up your daily and relationship life. If you're curious on how to work with me, then check out all the information in the podcast description. And for now, welcome to a new episode. Okay, welcome back to a brand new episode. I feel very inspired and passionate about this subject, which is basically around how to bridge these seemingly complete opposites, which on one hand we have freedom and space, on the other hand we have love and connection. And specifically in relationships, this is a topic that tends to come up between men and women, but in all kinds of relationships, and probably also at any point in your life, you've been in a similar situation or you can really resonate. I definitely can and have experienced this in my relationships in different waves and different flows. It comes and goes. Sometimes you're really in sync with your partner. Sometimes, you're struggling to kind of find that in sync space. And often it is around trying to get this in sync pattern when it comes through dancing through waves of having space and having waves of closeness and like really being together. And so I see this topic and this struggle come up with my clients, whether that's with, women in the Netherlands or women in the UK to people and couples in Bali. It really doesn't matter what culture you're in. This is something that at some point in your life you'll deal with. So I think it will be relevant in that sense for everyone. So first of all, I want to just dive into a little bit of like pointing out some examples of my life where I felt this duality, these two opposite sides, battling with each other in the sense of one was either right, the other was wrong, or the other way around, and really having the struggle of understanding how to let these two flow together and how can they coexist. Because actually, I think it's really good to know that they're opposite sides of the same coin, which means they're always connected to each other. These two topics like freedom versus love and connection, or space versus connection and closeness. And it's the only thing that needs to happen is to find a way in which you can shift to one or the other. And specifically as men and women, we teach each other this lesson of the other side. And so that doesn't mean that, okay, the other one is completely opposite and we can never come together. No, actually, we were designed to fit exactly like lock and key. And so we can teach each other. And if we come together, it's like just a perfect match and this ultimate amazing, blissful feeling. And so in this episode also, I'll be unraveling and revealing some ideas and tools and tricks that we personally use, me and Modestus, my partner, in our relationship to find this balance. And some things we found out along the way, which is just very important. Because I remember at certain point, because in the beginning of a relationship, often you just spend you're very excited to be together. It's kind of like nervous and so amazing. And there's so much energy. And so there's so much passion. So you spend a lot of time together in that beginning phase. And maybe slowly over time, it becomes more and more and more. You become more comfortable with each other. And then there comes a point where something kind of transitions and there might be a little bit a need for some more space or transition into, okay, where is this going? Then however the relationship unfolds, many of us at some point in our life start moving in together. So I would say before me and Modestus moved in together, so we didn't move in together until about 10 months or so into our relationship. And so before that, we had our own places. There was this natural flow of closeness, of space. At the same time, we were spending more and more time together just because we started to love each other so much more and started to build this life and just really, be uplifted by being in each other's presence. And eventually we decided to move in together, had a beautiful opportunity for our amazing house here in Bali. And in the beginning, it all seemed to kind of flow okay-ish until at some point we started noticing that this negative imprint around taking space started to happen, where we would feel in a way naturally the need to have some space. But because we're now sharing a space together, it was more complicated to do that and to really, have that feeling of space. And at the same time, this being together time started to become a little bit diluted too, in the way that the quality of it started to dilute, because now we were spending way more time together in the same space. But all of that time was kind of like mixed with also practical things in life and other things than really just being there to fully focus and be present with each other. And so that started to cause this negative imprint on space, in the sense of often we would get into some sort of discussion or argument or some sort of feeling of disconnect, and then we would start taking space, which really didn't feel good to my system. And it made me kind of like, more anxious in that way, like really nervous of like, no, but I want everything to be good all the time and we need to be close all the time, because often when we had space that was negative, there was not something good. And so that led us down into kind of this exploration of like, okay, how can we rewrite this? How can we do this differently? Because both of us were seeing, okay, this is not supporting either of us. Like, we're not getting happier about this. And I believe at the core, a relationship, you step into that because it adds something to your life, because something is being uplifted. And so as soon as that starts turning around, it might be a good moment to start being like, okay, what are we not seeing here? What kind of pattern did we step into where we weren't fully aware? And can we bring more awareness into that and start shifting that around? Now, another thing, I want to share an example of a client case that I had a few months ago. And in her relationship, they were having a phase where they're having lots of difficult discussions and conversations. And so, it was just a little bit of a dip, a down in the relationship. And as a result of that, basically what started happening is that he was taking more space. And at the same time, she started to crave more closeness and connection. Now, if she would express like, hey, I want to feel close and connected first before we take space, what started happening is that he didn't feel honored in his need for space. So he felt his need was not being honored. Now that impacted again her, ping-ponged back. And she was like, well, my need for closeness and connection is not being honored. And so basically there was this downward spiral. Now on top of that, then when they had taken space and they were kind of like coming back together and reconnecting, he was often craving sex. And she was like, well, I don't feel ready for that. I first want to feel the love and connection before I can open up to sex, which then, made him also feel disrespected again and confused on like, but now I want to connect and you're not taking my shape of connection. And so it basically started creating this chasm, this gap between the two. And basically, as I said, this downward spiral is just going down and down to a place which is not fun, where both people feel more and more drained and unfulfilled and lacking whatever they need. And then you start basically becoming like two baggers with like a bagging bowl of like to the other of like, just give me love, give me connection. And the other one is like, just give me more freedom and space. And like, or I need love, give me love. I want orgasms and pleasure. Please give me pleasure. Now, if two people in the relationship start doing that, and basically the cups are emptying, that doesn't lead to a fun space in a relationship, and not to a fun place, within yourself. It doesn't really lead anywhere. It definitely doesn't lead to a fulfilling, inspiring, passionate relationship. And so basically, if we're looking at this specific client case, for example, but also it will be linked back to the example I was giving that was happening between me and Modestus in our relationship at some point, is that there's two instinctual nature facts here at play that are important to mention, and which I want to highlight specifically in this podcast episode, because this is knowledge that you haven't been taught in school. And I think the world would be a very different place if you would have been taught these concepts and understand these principles about yourself, about your feminine biology, and at the same time about men and their masculine biology. Okay, so these two instinctual nature facts that will shine a lot of light on specifically this client case, but probably also on different examples in your life, are, first of all, is that men and the masculine is built around freedom. It's built around space. At the same time, the feminine, women, are built around love and connection. Now, this doesn't mean that women don't need space or don't need their freedom, and the other way around, that men don't need love and connection. We need both in our life. Also, we have both, no matter what gender you are, an inner masculine, inner feminine. So we have the desire for both of these, and to find a balance in your life between freedom and space and love and connection. But specifically, as I mentioned, men are built around freedom and space. That means their biology, their hormonal system is wired in a way that values freedom and space. Now, this goes back to evolutionary biology. The reason being for that in general, men were the ones that are exploring the world, finding new ways, also going out on hunts and hunting. And at the same time, if we're really purely looking at what biology is doing, if we're looking at biology everywhere around us, it's constantly trying to procreate itself. It's constantly trying to create the next version of themselves and to, basically expand. So at the core of that, the very root of who we are, there is a part of us that actually works like that still, because we're like connected. We are nature in that way. So there's a part of us that is constantly craving to just expand and procreate. And our biology is designed in such a way to make that as easy and effortless and almost like unconscious as possible, like it's just happening. And so that's with many of these biological facts, is like we're just unaware of it. But it really plays a big role, or it influences a lot of the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave, the way we feel, but we are unaware of that. And then we're basically becoming a slave of our instinctual nature, of our biology. And here we think we're like these free beings, can think for ourselves. True, but at the same time, you will get way more power over yourself and understanding if you start to see that, okay, there is this part of me that still acts like it's back in the day. It still acts like women are gatherers and men are hunters, and we're here just trying to procreate and create more of this species, to expand, to evolve, to become the next version of ourselves, until we became this in this human shape and form. And so from that essence, the masculine is designed to spread that, like, create that spaciousness, the variation, to go out into the world, to spread the seed, basically the semen, far and wide, to create this diversity in the genome, in the genes, because that creates better offspring. And so in that way, the masculine is designed are programmed to focus on freedom and space. Now, at the same time, the feminine, women, are programmed to focus on love and connection, because basically, if we're looking at evolution from that perspective, okay, we're here, the creators of life. Of course, men and women do that together. We can't do that without each other. But once the seed has been planted, then it's the feminine body that grows a baby for 9 months and then actually gives birth to life. And so that means our principle here is all about love and connection and closeness. So creating that bond between the mother and the child, because it's very important, again, for the survival of the species, that the child is being taken care of, that it's connected to something, because specifically a human baby, it takes many years before it's able to live life on its own, to take care of its own. And because of that reason, it's very important that there's someone supporting that. And so in that way, okay, biology was like, okay, we need to program one aspect that is like, okay, running far and wide, the other aspect that stays close and really focuses on connection. And that is like, again, I'm saying this very basically, but it helps sometimes to make it like trying to make it simplified in that way so you understand the principle of it. Now, because women are designed and programmed around love and connection, that's the way that we see the world through. So you can basically see this as like you're wearing a certain type of goggles. And so we're wearing the love and connection goggles, men wear the freedom and space goggles. Again, one or the other is not better or worse, although often from a feminine perspective, we would say, but like, what is that like judging the freedom and space goggles, because like we're looking from the love and connection goggles, so that like must be more important, right? And the other way around, men do that too. Now it's essential to start to understand that we again need both aspects and we shouldn't be judging the other, but let's bring more understanding into it and start to be more curious on, okay, wait, if I'm thinking from this perspective and the other from that other perspective, we might be looking to the exact same thing or want the exact same thing. We just approach it from a different direction. And instead of what we tend to do is like, wait, I'm looking here, you're seemingly over there, so we must be very different and we're probably not wanting the same thing. And probably we are not like, yeah, that just doesn't work. It actually does really work if we start to understand that we just have something to teach each other. And often we're actually really interested in the same thing. Because what women tend to think is that men, for example, don't want quality or connection and love, that they don't value that at all. And the other way around, sometimes men start to judge that women are too needy or too attached or want too much love or connection. Now, in its essence, yes, we have a natural desire that's in there and in our body, in our system, and a part of us needs to have that cup filled. And therefore, we seek each other just to learn from each other, but also we have to start seeing how we can fulfill that without, per se, needing the other in that. Now, that is one instinctual nature fact. The other one is because, as I mentioned in this client case, what was happening then when they got together, they wanted to connect in a different way. So the man was coming through sex and was like, well, I would like to have sex. And that makes me feel connected. Where the woman was like, I just want to feel love and connection first before I have sex. And so what is at play here is that men, like we call it in Tantra this the spiral to heaven. And so basically the door into the spiral to ultimate bliss, this ultimate feeling of love and ecstasy in this world. For the men, that's through the sex center. Now for the women, that's through the love center, which is the heart. And so again, opposite. So we have the same kind of intention, the same goal. We just approach it and we enter it from a different direction. And so that can get really confusing in a relationship where you can start to ask, okay, but how then do we bridge that? How do we bring this together? Now, before I answer that question, I want to give a few more examples of my own relationship and how this dynamic was playing itself out. So I was already mentioning how we started to see this blur between quality connection time and quality space time that started to kind of like merge and melt and become less clear after we moved in together. And that started to create this pattern on like this more anxiousness around space and this pressure around space, and often this negative association that space was coming with disconnection. And I think this is important specifically for women to understand and to learn, and that's also what the masculine teaches us, is that space or freedom doesn't automatically mean a disconnect from love and connection. Like space and freedom can happen, and at the same time you can be connected. And the other way around, that works too. And so I remember this moment, this awareness dropping in around one of these discussions that we're having, and suddenly seeing his point of view. So what was happening is that we were having this discussion of like, okay, I wanted more connection and he wanted more space. Now his argument was like, well, but we're like spending time all together in the space, like all the time. We're here together. So it seems logical that we need more space. And I used to get really offended by that, and instead being like, but what do you mean? Like, yeah, we're in the same space, but to me, that doesn't really feel per se like we're actually having connection. We're just there. So it feels really spacious. I actually desire connection. And so we would go back and forth around this and misunderstand each other and create discussions and arguments, and both of us not being happy around this, until suddenly I started realizing that we were just, again, as I mentioned, looking at the same issue from different sides. And so I also remember him, and he still does that because he's still a man. He will share from an experience or something that we're having, that he was like, oh, I really enjoyed that space that we have. Or like, I really enjoyed, yeah, just having our own separate time. That was really, I really love that. And for a long time in my relationship, that would make me feel actually not good about myself and about our relationship, because I would be like taking that personal and thinking that he was just needing and liking the space more than being with me. And so I would confuse that and take it personal, because he would always talk about space. And I was like, why isn't he talking about connection and how amazing our connection time is? Why does he only share the moments that he is been by himself? So what's the point of being with me? Until I started learning about this subject and understanding and applying it to our connection. And the more I have become aware of that, the more I can see that he's actually not saying, I don't like being with you. He's just, again, he's built around freedom and space. So that's what he values. That's what he puts focus and attention on. So that's what he notices, and that's what he registers more. On the other hand, I would always like talk about our connection, and this was so nice together, and you name it, which potentially might have done, like, that has the same impact on him in a different way of like, me not, because like the feminine brain doesn't really focus as much, doesn't approach the subject often from the essence of freedom and space. And so this also shows in that example of where we were living together, and he was thinking that the time we were in the same room was registered as connection time because we're together, where I was registering that as space time because we weren't really fully connecting in this quality, in this like really with presence and being with each other. And so when we finally started noticing that and seeing that, we were able to kind of snap out of it and look at the issue with more presence and a little bit more distance, instead of taking all of these things personal and thinking that like they need to come to my side or I need to go to their side. It's like, okay, what if we're in our own sides, in our opposite polarities, basically? What if we stand in our own truth and our own power, and then create this bridge to come closer together and to find this dance between these two subjects? Because also for a while, it really would confuse me, because I'm like, I do know that I also need space. And specifically, this subject started to play a role in this relationship for the first time in my life, where I really felt like my feminine being so activated that it would almost confuse me, why I would always be so focused on connection and almost forgetting my own space. And I think for women, this is another really important a fact to understand about the feminine biology, which all comes back to the same topic. Because as I was just mentioning, this spiral to heaven and like men coming through sex and women through love, that's again linked to the same subject of going back, gatherers and hunters, and like the sex center for men, that's their masculine power center. That's why they can, by being in the sex, that's also like it actually extends out of their body by that extra weight and that shape of the body. It brings a really different kind of awareness to your system. So you value different things, you focus on different aspects, and because of testosterone being the main sex hormone for men in general, then it creates a different psychology, a different way of behaving and thinking and acting. And so, but the funny thing is, we as women actually long for men to be connected to their sex center, because in that way we long for them to protect and provide us and to create that safety and security. And men can only do that when they're connected to their sex, when they're connected to this rootedness in their being. And at the same time, okay, women, we see the actual physical representation of love being the feminine power center and the main focus through the breasts going out of the body, representing that. And by having this weight here, we stand differently, we move differently, we behave differently as well. And that comes with a whole set of its own ways of seeing the world, plus like estrogen being the dominant female hormone impacts that as well. Now, what is good to understand about female sexuality is that our sexuality is more adaptive. So imagine that, okay, in back in the days we're in the jungle, and in general women are physically a little shorter, smaller, weaker, in their physical way of being. So being close to someone who's stronger and has more power is a smart option, a smart thing to do, because that means that you can survive longer. So really think about these instinctual nature facts as a part of you that's always trying to survive and trying to find the most efficient, safe, easy way to be to guarantee your survival and to guarantee the next offspring. And so that's where you can link all these patterns back to specifically that. Now, because of that difference in our physique, so what happens is that the women, the feminine psychology is often more adaptive and wants to mold and wants to please around the one that's more strong, because you want to like keep the protector and provider happy, so they want to actually protect and provide for you. Now, that doesn't have to become a problem in the essence of like just being aware of the fact that that's sometimes what can be happening. So I think for a lot of women, we tend to be confused on things of like why we might really feel this need to be close or need to connect and longing for love and longing for closeness. It's like, okay, just understanding that that's okay. That makes you normal. That doesn't make you weaker. That doesn't make you not a strong, independent woman. So like, try not to disconnect from that, because when you disconnect from that, you close off from your heart, you close off from your femininity. Now, when you start doing that, you close off from actually your true power. So that doesn't really solve or fix anything, even though what's happening now in society, that's what's started to kind of happen. This thought of like, okay, if we disconnect from that, then we can fix it, then we can solve it, then we don't have to be bothered with it. But that leads to a lot of women running into burnouts, becoming disconnected from their feminine essence, losing the sense of like, who am I, not understanding that, shaming and blaming themselves for certain patterns that might be popping up. I definitely did that for a long time in relationship, like really did not want to be considered the emotional one, or didn't want men to know when I was on my period and be considered weaker or unstable or crazy, or didn't want to come across as like needy or attachy. So I would always act really cool with lovers that I had and seem like all is fine and like, I don't know, I can just randomly have sex and that's okay. Until I dove into these teachings and started to really, get more and more connected to my feminine essence and my femininity, and realizing that I was disconnecting myself from core instinctual facts that are just like here, it's my nature, and that's actually not the solution whatsoever. The solution actually is to start to understand how I work, to bring more awareness into it, and from that space, sharing from that space, bringing in this creativity and intelligence on like, okay, so how can we come up with creative solutions to bring and bridge these two together? And so I think this is actually a beautiful bridge into, sharing some tips and tricks and principles that me and Modestus have applied in our relationship, which has really, really helped. And also we're, of course, always still exploring and discovering. And I think that is the main thing, specifically for those in a relationship, I would like to invite, is this innovative, creative mindset to not see your relationship as like a fixed thing or something that you need to make fixed, but instead seeing it as this moving organism of this dance between opposites, between men and a woman, or masculine and a feminine, depending on, how your relationship looks. But there's always this dance of opposites in a relationship, because you tend to attract someone that is opposite of you. That's why there's actual attraction happening. That's why initially you get drawn towards each other. And so then this dance starts of these two opposites that want to actually learn from each other, that want to come together. And if we're not actually seeing that or giving space and learning and growing through that process in order to find those ways to keep that dance going, then relationships tend to harden, become stiff, become less fulfilling, go into more of like trauma bonding, where you're just bouncing off pain of each other. And as I said with this client, like just spiraling down and down and down to a place where you're both super unhappy and just resenting the other and just really hating the other and just being like, fuck, but I'm right. That person is really wrong. And if there's one thing that never works when it comes to building a relationship or a connection, we have this beautiful quote is, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship? Because you cannot have both. So if you want to be in a relationship, then you have to choose that there is no right, that there's just difference, that there's two different perspectives and all of them are equally valuable. Now, specifically, the core answer to, okay, how to bridge this need for space versus this need for connection is Tantra. Because specifically, Tantra, if we're looking at the meaning of the word Tantra, it has a number of different meanings. One of them being is to weave, and specifically to weave together of opposites. So opposites, again, can be masculine, feminine, day and night, up and down, the sun and the moon. So to weave together opposites to find the ultimate truth. So Tantra teachings and meditations that we are practicing, they're designed in such a way to weave this duality together, to weave the opposites together. So practicing Tantra, like, that is just the key, basically, to forming this bridge. Then specifically to get a little bit more, into like details, because what is Tantra? What is a method? What is a meditation? For that, I highly recommend coming to our bridge immersion if you're in a relationship, in a couple. This is specifically an intro to Tantra weekend that we're organizing in the Netherlands together with Modestus. At the end of this episode, I will explain a little bit more on the next one coming up, but you can always find information in the podcast description as well. And so, Tantra methods and meditations are really something for you to experience. So I'm not going to unravel these methods because the only way in which to understand that is by to have the lived experience. So if I would talk about it, it might sound weird, or it might sound not logical, or it might sound not interesting. And so I don't want to create that imprint for you because there's no point in that. So basically what I would say is if you're feeling drawn towards Tantra, if you're feeling curious, which probably you are, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this episode, then find a place where you can actually practice and learn and get some of these juice of these methods to start to understand how to bring these two together and how to honor both. Now, again, specifically, one really interesting thing to understand is that men in general need cave time, we call it. So again, they're built around freedom and space. So their cave time is really important. Having just time to be with themselves, or to just basically get out of like having to protect and provide for a moment and basically gather new resources, and just fill up their own cup. Connect, like for them, like a meditation or connected to their presence. They really need no input and just having a cave to go into. Now, for women, we also need our own time, but instead of specifically cave time, and again, just really important to understand is that we both have an inner masculine, inner feminine. So if you're a woman and you're like, but I also need sometimes cave time, that's totally true. We all need that in a way. But yeah, it's just like, don't take it personal in that sense, but start to understand that like, okay, you need to create a balance between these two principles, and just know that in general, cave time for men is really important. On the other side, what's really important for women is this, how do I call it? Like, I almost want to say like a chicken hen time, but that sounds a little bit judgmental. Or at least I would used to really judge that of women, of like a women's circle of some sort. It's like, oh no, just a bunch of women talking and sharing. And that seems like so much hassle. But that was, of course, when I was really in my masculine. And that's how the masculine would look at it. It's like, that's not really my thing. Now, but what the feminine needs, or women need, is time to connect and to share with each other. And probably this is something what you tend to do with girlfriends, is you get together, you talk about life, about things that are coming up, about men, and you just chat, and you're going back and forth. One is sharing, the other is sharing, you're riffing off each other. It becomes one explosion of just like connection and bubbles and shares. Now, what tends to happen in relationships though, is that we tend to turn our partner, or we start to expect the partner to act like the opposite the opposite or like we are. Because, okay, as a man, okay, I need space. So then I assume that she also needs space in the exact same way. And the other way around, like I need connection time with my friends, for example. So I assume that that's also what he needs. And then we start maybe proposing that or pressuring each other to do so. Again, that doesn't work. The only thing you can do here is just always focus on yourself. The best thing you can do in a relationship is to focus on yourself first. Fill up your cup. So avoid being two beggars with empty cups coming together. And from full cups, then coming back into connection and then using these two full cups to come together to make an even fuller cup. That's what relationships are for. Now, at the same time, what we tend to start doing in relationships is expect the partner to be all of these different roles for us, to basically for them to take up all of these different roles. Like in the beginning, okay, we're just dating, so it's just maybe a lover or like a flirt. And then slowly we're expanding, okay, now it becomes your boyfriend. And then you start, I don't know, maybe working together or creating something together or moving in together. So, okay, now you become also housemates, and then you become business partners, and then you become friends too. And so you start expecting them to be all of these roles. And so if you start to do that with your partner, that is often starts to, over the long run, put a lot of pressure on them and on yourself too, if you need to perform all these different roles for your partner. So that is not a healthy thing to do. And that will cause a lot of like murkiness, and like that starts to dissolve any clear distinctions between you two. You become more and more like one merging, melting thing together. And when that starts happening, we think, oh, that's like a nice thing. But basically, we want that merging and melting to happen from being in polar opposites. So Tantra, yes, is trying to create that bridge, is trying to find a way to weave together of these opposites, but not by them just blending together. No, by them being in their opposite. Because if you think about weaving, there it will be like threads going into vertical lines and threads in horizontal lines. And by weaving them together, that's how we create a cloth or a tapestry. But if the threads would be all intermingled and there would no be distinction between up, like vertical and horizontal, it will become a very messy tapestry. It wouldn't probably even turn into a tapestry, it would just become a bowl of threads. And so that's basically a really beautiful representation of what tends to happen in relationships. So instead of weaving a beautiful tapestry, we're just having this entangled bowl of threads that's just a mess. And I'm pretty sure if you ever had to like untangle Christmas lights or anything of the sort, it's a hassle. It's not fun. It's annoying when these things come all together and merge. So yeah, trying to avoid that is really essential. And so by not putting the expectation on your partner for being all of these different roles, that really helps. And then also it's really important that you keep your own connections like outside of the relationship and have different people in your life fulfilling different roles. So instead of turning your partner into a girlfriend too, and he just needs to listen to you chat and like blah blah blah, like go kind of crazy about all these things. And I remember, again, this was a thing from the work of Alison Armstrong. The reason why we women have this need to share all these different facts and details, and like we go really specific, is actually because when we were gatherers, we would go out into the fields or into the forests, and we would start picking berries or scouting for vegetables here or fruits there. And basically we would need to use our brain to pick up all of these different signals and to understand, okay, this is potentially poisonous. Here something is growing, so I have to come back in a few weeks to pick the fruit. At the same time, around the corner, left from that tree, because we had to remember there will be some nuts coming out of the ground, so that's something good to come back to. So we would store a lot of detailed information, which was really important for us to gather. And so then we would come back and we would share that information with the tribe, with the other gatherers, to support each other in that, to share that information. So this is often from a very like primal point of view, where that need to chat and to share details, and why our brain tends to pick up so many details. And so we tend to share like that too. Now, if we start assuming that our partner is up for listening to all of that, and we start sharing that, then again, it's like we often don't respect him anymore just as our partner, as like, okay, what's the most important role that your partner can take? Most likely that's your lover. And yeah, this pure love connection that you're there. Is it really important for him to also act like your girlfriend? Again, doesn't mean that you can't share with him whatsoever, but just be more mindful of like, really, what do you share with your partner? Is that absolutely necessary? What roles are you expecting him to take? Do you have other people in your life where you can do that with? So it's really amazing for women to come together, for example, and to just have that chat. And I always noticed, like, if we would be in some sort of entanglement in our relationship, these issues were coming up, then if I would go spend time with my friends, it would be so rejuvenating, so recharging work for me, so relaxing, so fulfilling, that it would be so much easier to come back into the connection and understand where he was coming from. I would come back way more loving because I fill up my own cup, and didn't expect him to fill all those roles, to fill up all those roles. Now, another thing that's really helpful when it comes to bridging these two opposites is no judgment. That's where basically all starts. And by starting to bring more awareness to this. So specifically, if you're listening to this podcast, start to be curious and play this little experiment with yourself. Can you see these dynamics happening? Can you zoom out for a moment? So instead of straight away jumping into blaming or complaining or judging or assuming they're misbehaving or saying that there's something wrong and you're trying to prove your point, just being like, okay, what if I would not judge this situation? What if I would look at this as an interesting puzzle to see how to solve the puzzle, and how can we do that together? How can we do that as a team? So that mindset is really, really essential if you want to shift this dynamic, and if you want to snap out of if potentially you're going into a downward spiral. So essential to drop the judgments and to bring more meditation and meditative awareness into this subject in your life. Another thing that we really started applying, and we're still applying and puzzling with, and it always shifts and changes because, okay, our life situation shifts and changes. Like, first we were living together in a house in Bali. The last few months we've been traveling around in a van. Again, a whole different shift of our connection, the way we're living together, the way we're moving through life together. So we had to like sit back together again to figure out, okay, how to create this new balance between these two opposites. But in general, what is really important is that you have a clear distinction between connection and space. And so the more clearness in that distinction you can create, the more easy it will be for both involved, because there's just clarity, and it will feel less murky and entangled. Because if you create a really clear, okay, now we're having space, and really creating also quality space time. So that's essential too, because basically you want to dive into the opposite or the one of these experiences fully. In Tantra, we have this beautiful yin yang symbol. You probably have seen that once, where you have this like kind of S shape and these kind of two fishes coming together, but then there is one dot. So in the black side, there will be a white dot. In the white side, there will be a black dot. Now there's a specific reason for that, because basically these sides, these white and black colors, represent the masculine and the feminine. Now, at the same time, it shows that if you dive fully into one aspect, so if you would dive fully into the white, into the masculine principle, then a door will open up, the black little dot, into the other side, and the other way around. If you would fully dive into the feminine principle, then a door opens up into the masculine principle. And that's when this kind of infinity loop starts creating between these two principles. That's how we start to weave them together. So if we're saying space, there's ways in which you can take kind of shitty space, or you can really think about what is the most nourishing way of taking space. And that can be different for both of you. But really answering, okay, what if in this ultimate world, what is like really quality space time? How would that look? And can you create that for yourself? Now, of course, it depends on your life situation, but you can always like see what is available for you. And again, using this creativity, this innovative mindset, stepping out of how you think relationships need to be, how you think what you think is possible, because often that's the only limitation that's coming up in relationships, is that we're staying stuck in what we think is right or wrong, or what we can do and cannot do. And the moment we're like getting examples of other people or getting new inspiration, we start to see actually different things are possible. For example, when it comes to the bridge immersion, there's often couples that are saying this thing, well, I can't, I would love to join with my partner, but the kids need to be a little bit older. We cannot do that now. Again, it's like, okay, if you want to believe that, then yeah, that's what's happening. However, we've seen in the last bridge immersion, for example, there was a couple that had a 3-month-old baby, and they decided to show up and be there anyways and make it possible. Now, that to me is so freaking inspiring, because it shows that there's always a different way. And so you're yourself limiting yourself. No one else is doing that. Anything is possible. So remember that. And that's also really, that kind of mindset is essential to keep up leveling into your relationship, to keep it alive, to keep it passionate, to keep it playful, allowing that change to happen, to think of creative solutions. And so, okay, what is quality space time? At the same time, asking yourself, what is really quality connection time? And creating then space for both. So in a relationship, like really consciously creating space for both is essential for both parties to be fully and for everyone involved in general to feel fully fulfilled. And then also it becomes way more playful and way less like, oh, they're taking space, so I guess I need to take space too. It's seeing as an invitation. Okay, they want to take space. Amazing. I see it as an invitation for me to learn. Most likely, if they need to take space, and actually I also need to take space, because we're connected. We're a team in this relationship. And so maybe you weren't so aware of it, because again, as women, we tend to be a little bit less aware of that. We tend to, I would say, quote unquote, lose ourselves a little bit faster. It's because we're more moldable and adaptive. Again, as I shared before, we tend to want to please a little bit more. Now, again, don't like shut yourself now down from femininity and fuck that, I don't want to be a woman, that's terrible. It's like, okay, no, just be aware of that, and then see if your partner asks for space is a beautiful invitation if you weren't aware of it as much. Or it might be the other way around in your connection, to be like, okay, what can I learn from this? And then really tune in, how can I create this and go dive fully into this experience of having space, and how can I fully dive into this experience of having quality connection time. And so one of the things that we applied in our relationship for a while was called the Sunday rule, where we started noticing, as I mentioned, this negative connotation on space, that we only would take space when we're disconnected and had an argument or something, and that would really not feel good. And so in order to avoid that, because also at the same time it was so tempting to be together because we love each other, and it was so tempting to just sleep together every night and to spend a lot of time together, specifically because we were living together in the same house. So we created the Sunday rule to make that easier, and as an experiment. So we just tested it out for a while. And the Sunday rule basically was that every Sunday night we slept apart, and we had the luxury in our house to have 2 separate bedrooms. So that made that specifically more easy in that way. And so basically on Sunday night, one of us would sleep in the other room. And that would just be something that we would, like every week we would just do, even if we were feeling like, oh, but actually tonight I just really feel like it would be so much nicer to be close. Still to be like, no, I know this is a structure we invented, or an experiment we're doing, because I know at its core it's just really smart to sometimes take that space. I know it will nourish us, and at the same time, okay, if we really felt like being close, then just dive into that, oh, I'm going to really miss you feeling, and really use that as a spark to come together the next day. And sometimes it would feel more natural of like, I actually feel like it would be really good to have a night off. But by doing that Sunday rule, it really made it so much easier to uphold that, because then I wouldn't start, or he wouldn't start creating a story of like, oh, now she's asking for a night apart. Like, does that mean that she doesn't love me anymore, or that he doesn't love me anymore? Or like, is he annoyed with something? Is something wrong? You basically don't give yourself the chance to go into those kind of patterns. It's just like, okay, we're trying out this experiment. And at some point, we decided to let go and be a little bit more fluid in it, a different life situation, and we had to be creative in another way, but still always with the intention. And we rewrote this negative connotation on space. And then from there, we came out of that, and we could naturally more easily flow and take that space more easily whenever that was necessary. And again, as I was mentioning, this is a constant dance. So when we were the last 4 months making this shift and we bought this van and started traveling all over Europe and we would spend so much time together in a very small space, we had to kind of reinvent how we're doing this and how we're flowing with this. And so it is in that way a constant a constant balance to be found. But how I like to look at balance, it's not like a fixed point that you want to reach or like a straight line, like finally I found the balance. But I see balance as this beautiful dance of up and down, of waves. And so balance is nothing more than just being able to flow from up to down, from up to down. And so that is what balance is for. So that puts a lot of pressure of like, I never find balance. I never find that fixed point, because I believe that's something you will almost never find, because balance is just this dance of up and down. Now, two more things to add on this. Specifically, what I did also with another client that was struggling to find connection and quality time with her partner, because she was saying, but I want more connection. I want more connection. I want more connection. I was like, okay, I hear a really clear need and desire for what you want. You're really longing for more closeness and connection with your partner. Now, can you get specific on what that connection means? So we were just talking about creating quality space and quality connection time. And I think it's really important to have a chat with your partner, what space to someone means. For example, when me and Modestus we moved in together, it became really clear that the way I take space, or what I register as space, is really if I'm alone in the house. Where Modestus would register space as him just being in the room. I can still be in the house and I could be sometimes around, but basically energetically not really being having kind of like, I could be around still him, but having more of an energetic clarity and like, okay, I'm not reaching out in that way. And so he can really feel like he has space in that way. And for me, that was just so like confusing, or like, so not how I saw it, because it doesn't really work for me. And so having a conversation on that is really valuable, on like, okay, what does space mean for you and what does space mean for the other? And to just be aware of that, because otherwise you can think, okay, we're having space, or I'm taking my space, so the other one probably has space too. For example, Vanessa was like, okay, I'm taking space, then she's having space too, and I wouldn't register that. And so we would get into discussions and miscommunications around that subject. Now, at the same time, getting clear on what connection means, like having a conversation, sharing on like, what do you register as connection? What is connection to you? How would you like to experience that? What makes you feel close? And getting really clear on what that means. And now specifically for women, if you're really like having constantly this longing of connection, I want more connection, this longing, really getting clear and true to yourself. Okay, how does that look? Can you make that a little bit more specific? Because the more you can get clear on what you need, it's going to be so much easier to ask for that, and so much less unclear. Because if we start to keep on saying to our men, I want connection, I want more connection, I want more connection. Now, first of all, again, their system is built and valued around freedom and space. So that's what they really understand. Connection might be a little bit more foreign. So then it becomes really like, okay, I hear what she needs. And in general, know that the man really wants to provide and serve the feminine. So there's nothing more frustrating to a man than not being able to do that, specifically for their woman that they're in a partnership with. So now that happens when a request comes in that's vague and he's like, I don't know how to fulfill that. And that's so frustrating and painful for the masculine, because then he feels like, okay, there's actually no way I can serve my woman because I don't know how to do that. And that will make him actually almost retract and be like, then there's actually no point in trying because I'm going to fail anyways. And there's nothing worse than failing in front of your woman. So, the more you can get clear on what you need and can communicate that more clearly, the easier it will be also for that to be fulfilled. So keep that in mind. And lastly, what I would highly recommend when it comes to connection and having connection, the way in which that tends to be way more fulfilling and way more effective, specifically for couples that are having kids or having a limited amount of time to be together, is that when you connect, when you're really focusing on being together, do that without using words. So very often we connect and we're together and we use our words, we talk, we share, we only, use this more, and the words are linked to this more logical side of the brain. So then you will always be trying to form that connection from the logical side of the brain, which is the masculine side of the brain. And remember, the feminine principle is connection. So you want to basically connect to the feminine side of the brain when you're doing that. And the feminine side of the brain is more about creativity, about feeling, sensing, and the domain is not words. So finding ways in which to connect without words is highly recommended. And again, this is where Tantra kicks in, because Tantra offers many methods and meditations also where you don't use words and where you learn to connect just by being together, by being in your body and forming, feeling what is really there and letting that connection automatically happen. And knowing that, again, all of us have a need for both freedom, space, and loving connection. So for some women that don't believe that men need loving connection, they totally do. They also need intimacy, and they love being in the presence of a feminine being. That really fills their cup, that really inspires them. So don't start to battle together, because there's no point in battling, because we want the same thing. We just need to find a way to be a team in making that happen, to creating this beautiful dance, this beautiful balance between the two. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Now, before you tune out, if you felt inspired, enjoyed listening, had some beautiful insights, I would really highly appreciate it if you could leave me a 5-star review or share the episode with a friend or on your social medias. Also, as always, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or anything you would like to share. You can do so on my Instagram at Dieke Terweel. That is DIEKETERWEEL. Also, if you're curious on how to work with me, then make sure to check out the information in the podcast description. And for now, I hope to see you in the next one.